You are listening to the Logbook Project podcast, and we appreciate you tuning in. The Logbook Project is a global journey of a World War II pilot's logbook, collecting first-hand accounts of veterans, witnesses, and victims from all sides of this horrific conflict. The project is intended as a token of remembrance and education to raise awareness of the sacrifices made. We encourage you to learn more about our project at our website, thelogbookproject.com. We wish you a warm welcome to our very first Logbook Project podcast. My name is Lars McKee. I'm the project webmaster, talking to you today from Sweden and from the tropical paradise of St. Lucia, project founder Nick DeVoe. How are you doing, Nick?
I am good.
Good. This podcast is entirely devoted to describing the Logbook Project, what we're trying to do, and how it all came about. The introductory episode will establish a context for each of the 200 individual World War II witness accounts within the project that we will explore in subsequent podcasts. We hope that we will spark your interest today in the hopes that you will journey with us as we delve into the amazing stories of the project signatories. And with this, I will hand you over to Nick.
That's a pretty good introduction, if I do say so myself. All right, so what is the logbook? It's a World War II pilot's logbook. So first of all, in and of itself, it is an artifact of the era. The book is about 80 years old. And since 2016, it has been on a journey, going much of it unaccompanied, to veterans and witnesses around the world who agree to receive it, sign it, autograph it. Some of them may or may not add a little bit more about their story, but just the fact that they agreed to sign it and be associated with this project, this journey, allows us to then explore their amazing stories in more detail. And so that in a nutshell is what the Logbook Project is and has been. So
let's talk about this logbook then. We keep referring to it on many occasions. It was a genuine RAF pilot's logbook. It was issued to a pilot who was participating in the war. Tell us, Nick, who was the pilot?
So, pilot was my dad, and I am the last of his 10 children. I always had a fascination with World War II. Everything about it, just the size, the scope, the allegiances, the betrayals, the massive amount of resources consumed. World War II also still possesses some of the records in terms of the logistics and movements of men and materials and women and troops. And it's a phenomenal, aspect to human history. And the legacies of what happened have rolled out across the geopolitical landscape and shape our world up to today. So the book belonged to my father. My father went off to become a pilot during World War II. And this book has always been in our family, sort of gathering dust in a shelf. As millions of these veterans around the world, or thousands, I guess I should say, he never really spoke about the war. So the book really, it's not like the book was some sort of central part of the family. It just sort of resided in a quiet corner somewhere. As many World War II artifacts do, and other wars, I suppose, as well. I knew it existed. I had seen a bit, but to say I ever sat with my father and went through the book with him and asked him questions, no, actually, I never did. So foolishly, when I was, I guess, about 11, I stumbled across it again in my mother's dresser one day. And I was flipping through it, and the old man's handwriting is impeccable in the book. But I was too young to appreciate the data that resided in that document, which to our listeners, I would say, you, Lars, have helped me appreciate so much more now my father's journey and what that data really represents. But we will get to that.
Yeah, that's part of the project that we're trying to document and trying to find more about as well. And that's your father's journey.
Yes,
which is basically stemming out of this logbook more than his own accounts. So we're trying to follow his flights and all that from the data that we're finding in his logbook.
Yes. So, and as this project has gone along, because you're right, there's my father's individual story, which in the scope of things, in the context of World War II, my father's service history is actually quite almost, you could even say boring. He never actually went into combat, thankfully, because I probably wouldn't be here talking to you if he had. He ended up joining late, even though he was way old enough to do so. But and that's another part of the story that's not, we're still trying to tease out. As his story goes, it's certainly not one of the more remarkable ones. However, having said that, thanks to you and your amazing capacity to delve into the details, I now have a much better appreciation for exactly what he did and the places he went to and the real dangers that he did face. Yes, it wasn't combat, but there was loads of training related accidents. The equipment, you're talking about equipment that's 80 years old, whatever navigational aids, whatever aspects of weather that they had to deal with. The technology has come a long way in flight since then.
Certainly has.
You have pointed out things to me that I'm just absolutely amazed by. So yes, he didn't actually go up there and pull a trigger and shoot at another living human being, which and I'm grateful for that, because that in itself carries with it its own burden that my old man never had to deal with. So I'm actually thankful for that. But equally am I thankful for those who did go and face, the real carnage of war.
Let's just recap this then. So you have your father's logbook, which is basically a priceless family heirloom. It's resided
Right.
within the DeVoe family for decades. How in the world do you come up with this crazy idea of taking that book and sending it around the world?
Right. So as I mentioned, the era of World War II just has always fascinated me. And it's not because of my father necessarily. It just by itself, because like I say, he didn't tell me, he didn't regale me with stories of the war. I asked him one or two little questions, but really, so it really was just something that you could say I was born with or whatever. I can't tell you where it came from. So any news story would pop up on my news feed, whatever, World War II, I would always at least scan it, just out of idle curiosity, nothing else. And by no means did I consider, even now, do I consider myself any sort of expert. I certainly have learned a lot more about the war because of this project. I have a much better understanding of some parts of it, but the scope and scale of the conflict is just such that, you could never, there's nobody, one individual could tell you they're an expert on all parts of the war. I don't think it's possible. It's just too much material. One day, a story showed up on my news feed, and it was about this Japanese fighter pilot named Kaname Harada. Mr. Harada, an amazing profile. He was 99 years old at the time. This is back in 2016, and he had served at all the major Japanese air conflicts with the Americans. He was at Pearl Harbor. He didn't actually bomb the harbor, but he had to remain and guard the aircraft carriers. He was at Midway. I can't remember all the battles, but all the main ones that you think about, he was there. And he certainly was a very accomplished pilot. He shot down several Allied aircraft. He himself was shot down. So in terms of his quote unquote creds as a World War II pilot, this guy certainly was the real deal. And what intrigued me about him was that he came back from war, and in the years following became a very outspoken peace advocate. But actually, even before that happened, he was a man always at turmoil within himself because of the terrible violence he had witnessed, been part of, participated in. It just didn't sit well with him. And his wife encouraged him actually to open a kindergarten, which he did. Apparently, they ran a kindergarten school over in Japan. And then in later years, he became more and more outspoken as a pacifist, saying, war. I mean, he obviously very, very passionate about, looking for other ways to resolve conflict, as opposed to picking up arms and blowing each other's brains out. So his profile, his history, everything about him, something in reading this man's story, I suddenly had this completely impulsive thought of, imagine if I could get Mr. Kaname Harada's autograph in my father's logbook. That was it. I just and something about that just completely intrigued me. It still does. You know, how cool would it be to get this World War II ace veteran and a Japanese man at that, a culture that was a complete mystery to me, literally on the other side of the world, 12 hours ahead from where I live. Just how neat would it be?
Yeah, you didn't just go down the street, did you?
No, 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 no. No, yeah, normal people would do that. You know, people, sane, rational thinking people would do that. Yes, yes, that was not me. No, I decided to go to the other side of the planet into a culture I knew absolutely nothing about, certainly not the language, and that was just for starters.
How did you get in touch with him? I mean, how did you
So
reach out and get in touch with Mr. Radovin?
yeah, I the article was written by, it showed up on CNN's website. And in fact, for years, I used to tell people it was the BBC, but even that, I had that wrong in my head. Only recently to correct that. It was a CNN article. I forget the writer at the time, but I tracked down the writer through LinkedIn and made contact and asked and basically explained if I could get the gentleman's autograph. And that person very kindly communicated with the family. And the response was positive. The response was, can't remember, you know, I wish I could go back and look at the original correspondence, but like I said, it wasn't by email. I think it was through LinkedIn. But anyway, she came back and she said, yes, if I got the book to Japan, he would sign it. And so then so the first hurdle was cleared in that sense, because obviously you've got to get permission. You don't just show up with this thing, you know. So that was the first hurdle. And I thought, wow, this could actually happen. So then the next major thing was, all right, how on earth do I get this book to Japan? This priceless heirloom, as you say. And all this time, and remember,
Let me ask you then, Nick,
yeah,
at this point, obviously, Nick, you're the youngest of 10 children.
correct. The
And I
youngest of
guess
10,
all the other nine, were they in agreement of what you were about to do?
I did the smart thing and didn't tell a soul. Because first of all, you know, to try and explain that to anybody, I would have been laughed out of the room. And yeah, sometimes you just kind of have sometimes too much diplomacy is not a good thing. You just kind of have to be a little dictatorial on some things. And I made an executive decision of one. The other thing was, I knew that in the scheme of things, I was really the only one in the family truly interested in this part of our dad's career. I mean, I'll be honest about that. And I think the rest of my family would agree with that statement. That they knew it was something that dad did, but they didn't have the sense of intrigue that I did. At least not that I was ever aware of. But I think that's a fair statement. So, and I figured, look, this will be on me. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. But it honestly, Lars, even now as I sit and think about it, I mean, what on earth was I thinking? It was nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, who would do such a thing, you know? And I tell you, if I had gone, now my dad died in 1997. If he had been alive and I had gone to him and said, hey, Dad, guess what? I found this Japanese man and I think we should send him your book. He would have looked at me and then he would have called some sort of social services to come and have me communicate. Like, he'd have been like, hell no, that is not happening. You want to send him something, send him your scrapbook. You're not sending my logbook. Are you nuts? So I know that would not have met with his blessing. At least I don't think. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, so then the question became, how do I get this thing over there? And of course, mail in and out of St. Lucia, although who knows? I guess I could have mailed it, but I wouldn't have trusted that. I could have couriered it, but even that I wouldn't have been too thrilled about at the time. Remember, this is the very first time, right? At the time, I worked for an organization called the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And I remember I've grown up in St. Lucia. My father was born here. St. Lucia is a tiny little island, as you mentioned, in the Caribbean, 180 odd thousand souls. Our main economy is based around tourism and services. So it really is a small little country. Yeah, so services in and out of here can be a bit sketchy sometimes. But as I say, I work for this organization of the Eastern Caribbean states, which is a representative of the English-speaking Eastern Caribbean states that participate in certain regulatory bodies collectively. So we have a common currency, common judiciary, customs, we have the same education and so on. Like a mini EU then, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do a lot of interaction with various governments and donor agencies around the world. And at the time, my boss, Didicus Jules, was about to head off to Japan on travel duty. And so I just thought, right, well, at least that was one leg, that was the big leg of the journey that I could count on to get across the Atlantic and then wherever else he had to go to get there, or the Pacific, but I think he went the Atlantic through England. I was, knowing the little that I did know about Japan was that it is a highly efficient, organized country. And having visited there subsequently, I could certainly attest to it. So I wasn't worried about once it was in Japan. I did have one English-speaking contact in Japan, somebody who I knew because of prior business dealings on a personal level. His name is Mr. Richard Howard. I had reached out to Richard, and Richard had agreed. When I told him this crazy idea, he thought it was pretty cool, and he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll help you. I'll act as your Japanese liaison." He and his wife Yoko. Richard is a Kiwi, but his wife is Japanese, so that was a really wonderful connection actually to have that. So I wasn't totally out of my mind. I mean, at least I had a safe house where I knew the book was going, and Richard agreed to receive the book. So then the day came when my boss was traveling, and yes, that was a defining moment, because all of a sudden now it was like, this is where the rubber hits the road, and the gravity of what I was doing really hit me at that moment. And it was very sobering. It was like, wow, this is really crazy. This is really crazy. And I was sweating, and I was not in a happy headspace at all, but I thought, man, you gotta do something. Inside was just like, man, just do it. So I did, stuffed it in the envelope. And then in those days there was no neoprene sleeve, there was no waterproofing. I just jammed the book in an envelope. You would have been having a heart attack.
This is where I'm starting to needing to take pills and stuff.
Yeah, the first couple of trips that the book took were hard on the book. They were. I was stupid. I was very green and not thinking. But anyway, thankfully the book has made it through my naivety. But anyway, so I put it in the envelope, went downstairs, and Didicus was leaving, and I said, "Look here, when you get to Japan, please mail this." And had I just left it at that, it would have been fine. But I think he asked, "Okay, what is it?" Which is a fair question. And I told him, and he was horrified. He really tried to dissuade me, which I am sure if anybody came to me with a similar situation, I'd be like, "Listen, take that thing home and don't be stupid," But no, this kind of went back and forth, and we kind of.
Do you think that was more due to him not wanting to take responsibility for your father's book, or the fact what you were about to do?
All of that. Yeah, I mean,
Both
somebody tells you they're going to jump off a cliff, why would you want to participate in that? I mean, it wasn't that, but it was risky. It was highly risky, and yeah, and like I say, if I had been in his shoes, I'm sure I would have had the exact same reaction. Somebody comes to me with like a Medal of Honor or some the Croix de Guerre or whatever, and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna mail this up." Be like, no, take that thing home. So anyway, but whatever, I prevailed upon him, and I guess he long story short, he got on a plane, left with it, and off it went. And I did not sleep too well for the next couple of nights, I will say that. And my wife was, she was not very sympathetic, because she was like, "Well, what were you thinking?" And what was I thinking? So that is the story of how, Mr. Harada sparked that, like I said, totally impulsive, triggered in my head, this crazy idea that just came to me, but inspired by this man's story, what he did after. I would say both of those things. I think if Mr. Harada had just been a World War II vet that you read about, and maybe, there he was, I and as I'm telling you this is the first time I'm actually thinking this through. But there was something about his post-war life that really equally, it was his whole life that really I found so inspiring.
And for disclosure, the next episode of this podcast is actually going to be on Mr. Harada, where we're going to delve into some of the details about Mr. Harada and the exploits of the book in Japan in and around Mr. Harada. So yeah, I mean, where are we? That's 7 years later, and 240 plus signatories later. It's kind of interesting to sit here and talk about it and kind of summarize it and actually hear about it, how it all started.
It is, I would say it is a unique story. And inevitably, when people, I mean, you and I have been living it now. You came along into the project a couple of years later. I've been living with it since 2016. So it's like anything else, it's become part of, maybe some of the wonder has worn off. And yet, every time you meet a new signatory, it sparks right back up again. So like just prior to this podcast, you and I were talking about a 101-year-old nun in Trinidad, who I'm going to hopefully speak with tomorrow, who I just found out existed. And I was just in Trinidad 2 months ago, who I could have met. And anyway, but all of that to say, it is a unique story. And I think, even if you take me out, you take my dad out, just what hopefully, as we talk about what is the legacy of this project, well, it really is a tribute. I mean, it has become so much more than my father's story. Cyril DeVoe was a World War II pilot. He was fully qualified. He just happened not to go into combat because of the circumstances of where he was and when he arrived in England. However, the signatories, as you mentioned, almost 250 of them, those signatories now have made this book a real, I mean, it really is. It's a small, humble little token, but the weight of the stories that reside in those pages make that document absolutely unique and really staggering when you delve into the different profiles of who has signed this book. And it's been a journey. We hope that this podcast now becomes a reflection of that journey so that persons will come along with us and meet, like that old Sesame Street song, who are the people in your neighborhood? Well, who are the people in the logbook? And we will be delving into them as we go along.
It's almost hard to explain to people who are not fully familiar with the project and what it is. I mean, some people, when you approach them and you try to explain it to them, it's like, oh, it's like an autograph collection. And well, yeah, almost, yes. It's autograph, but it's so much more than that. And I mean, I'm gonna allow myself one digression here. And this might speak to any Harry Potter fan out there. And I'm not gonna spoil anything, but in one of the movies, there's this Horcrux. It's a physical object where a dark wizard can sign part of their soul to in order to achieve immortality. And I'm not in any way suggesting that our signatories are dark wizards, but the principle is about the same. Every veteran has a very unique connection to World War II. And as they put the ink to the page of the logbook, they sign a piece of their legacy to that logbook, a small fraction of it, allowing us to tell it. And there's 250 of them almost in the book right now. And that's a big legacy to carry right now as a container.
It is. And then when you start to delve into the stories, and the stories are very varied. It's a real cross-section of stories, nationalities, experiences. There are Holocaust victims in there, pilots, sailors, submariners. The stories are as varied as you can throw a dart at a wall. They really are. Some are more dramatic than others. Some are more unbelievable than others. We don't necessarily know all the full details of some of these stories. New information is constantly coming to light. Sometimes we are led down paths that are not, are contradictory. That's not to say that we think that any of the stories in there are misleading, but at the end of the day, you're dealing with persons relying on their memories to tell you things. And it is 80 years. No, is it 80? Yeah, it's almost 80 years after the
Oh,
fact. So by no
I
means
can't
are,
remember what I did 2 weeks ago.
well, there you go. So we are constantly updating, we constantly look, but at the end of the day, like was said years ago, facts do matter, and we've tried very, very diligently to present these things to the best of our ability in with what information is provided to us to tell these stories. Um, one
One,
thing,
one thing, one thing that we probably need to also kind of illuminate a little bit, and that is that we're collecting the accounts from all sides. It's not
yes,
exclusively to the allies or anything. We have, I believe, last time I did any check, I think there was 21 different nationalities that
right,
had signed the logbook today. And that
right,
includes almost, German signatories, Japanese, Russian, French, British, you name it, 21 different nationalities.
yes,
And the
yes,
diversity spanning over this horrific conflict is just incredible once you start kind of summarizing it and start to look at it in the greater context. So, yeah.
absolutely. Which is another I'm glad you mentioned that because you're right. That's another aspect of my humble effort, and by no means have we succeeded. But it was I always wanted to I didn't necessarily want to get focused in on any one genre or any one theater of the war. I really, because it's so broad in its scope, I purposely wanted to pull stories from just from wherever, and not that anybody needs to go through and learn all of the stories or anything, but if anybody, what I hope is that people come encountering this, now 10 years from now, 100 years from now, would would be intrigued and maybe because of that go in and delve even into one or two profiles or into one or two theaters of the war and learn a little more about, even if it's just one aspect, then that would have been a mission accomplished for me, in terms of just raising awareness of
Yeah.
what happened,
I mean,
and why,
and
my God,
that's
it can't happen
And
again.
that's, I guess that's what we're hoping to achieve over the next episodes to come, where we're going to try and cover each signatory in at least some of them are going to be more detailed than others,
Yes,
simply
yes,
because that's what we know more about. Some of them are even going to have more specials because we're still interacting. We're still having a great
yes,
contact and interacting with some of these veteran signatories
yeah,
still to this day.
yeah.
So hopefully we might even have a few of them on, and we've also have some interviews done that we hope when we come to that specific veterans podcast episode or profile episode,
You
we
can
hope to be
share
able
that.
to kind of
Yeah,
use that a little bit. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because there's nothing like interacting with a veteran, somebody who was really there. Um, it really is a very special and unique thing. And as you say, some of these people have, well, a lot of them have died, and when we've suffered through the pain of that. Some of them you get close to, and it's always hard to lose a friend. And some of them have become really good friends to the project. So it's been a most remarkable journey. And then the last little bit I would like to throw in here is that, for every signature, there is an associated facilitator, somebody who does the legwork on the receiving end, who runs about, gets the book signed, gets it presented. Don't forget, the average age of the signatory in that book is anywhere from about 95 to 100, and I think 108 is our oldest signatory. So these are not people out and about. These are people who are largely at home in the very last. The other thing is I've started this project much too late. These people they'll all be gone within 10 years, which that has its own aspects to the logbook project and the journey and other things that have happened along the way. But so as a result of that, there's always a facilitator, somebody who agrees to say, yes, I will help you. I will get this book presented to whoever the signatory is, and I'll get it back in the mail to you. Often family members, but just as often not. And to them is owed such a debt of gratitude for helping us for the project being the success that it is today. It is really more than just a veterans project. It also is like a bespoke cooperation project. And again, as you pointed out, all those nationalities, it's people all around the world who have just jumped in and said, yes, I want to be part of this. I want to help you. And so that is certainly something that I never dreamt of when I first read about Mr. Harada all those years ago. But yet here we are, 7 years later, however many thousand miles later, with the people that we've met, the institute, and our network has grown. We now have this amazing little grassroots network around the world. You mentioned people like Todd and Veterans Breakfast, and we have people like Mike Meir, who is a de facto director of the project. We have people like Ross Stewart, Pierre-Alain Leteneur over in France. Those are the ones who have journeyed with us. Margaret McAvoy is another name I have to throw in there. My own family.
We have to do a specific episode on the facilitators and the associates. But that will be for later episodes. I think probably maybe we should allow Banksy to end this one for us with a quote. It exists in many forms. It goes something like, they say you die twice. First, when you stop breathing, and then a second time a little bit later on when somebody says your name for the last time.
Sure.
And I think that's probably what we're trying to do here. In a way, we're hoping to give their sacrifices immortality and for people to learn from, should they be inclined to do so.
Yeah. And also just for people to take another look at the insanity of our world today. As you and I speak, there are two raging conflicts going on in two parts of the world that, the world is a very unstable place. And it's when people become complacent that, I don't know why, but we as a species really seem to enjoy killing each other. And it boggles my mind. And God, have we repeated the same mistakes over and over? So that there is something that I really hope for people who encounter this journey will take that into their thinking, their way of thinking, and realize that there is so much more that unites us as a species than divides us. It is usually the most dangerous people who focus on the divisions. Those are the ones that you have to be most wary of. So there's that. So just a quick note to our listeners, as we say, we really hope you come along with us on this journey and join us on our next episode when we delve into what happened in Japan and our very first signatory, and that you will come back and journey with us on this remarkable project of the last 7 years and meet some of these people. You can come and go as you like. Feel free also to reach out to us. We encourage persons to shoot any questions or any new information or any correcting information. We don't have everything perfect, but it's in sharing these ideas and growing the network that we create a better product. So we hope to hear from you. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Bye. You have just listened to an episode of the Logbook Project podcast, a non-profit initiative seeking to illuminate and preserve some of the veteran legacies of World War II. To contact us or obtain more information about our project, please visit our website, thelogbookproject.com. We would love to hear from you, and thank you for listening.